Get things started. Everyone, please, like you're already doing, add your city and state where you're from. Why don't I start things by just officially welcoming everyone to our webinar. It's our HUG webinar entitled 2025 Sales Automation Blueprint, Steps to Using AI to Drive Revenue Growth. So if you're interested in AI or automation, or you've been hearing a lot about it, especially with respect to sales, to go to market, to marketing, you're definitely in the right place. This is our HUG webinar. HUG, also known as HubSpot User Group. The name of our HUG is AI and Automation in Sales and Marketing. And we've been very busy. Colby, we're getting a lot of interest. Let me just introduce myself, Philip Levinson, CMO of Mobileforce, and co-leader of this great HUG, and my partner in crime, Colby Hansen from Evenbound. Hey, Colby.
Hi, Phil. Excited to be here. Lots to talk about today.
Thanks for joining. And how many times have you heard something about AI and automation just this past week? It must be at least several dozen.
Oh yeah, every day for sure. So very topical.
And even while you were traveling, you couldn't avoid.
No.
We're all following some of the news and developments, so we're all excited about that. And we've got three great presenters. Colby, do you want to introduce them and tell everyone what we're doing?
Yeah, let's get started. I'm actually going to kick us off with a chat icebreaker. So just to get everyone comfortable with where the chat is and what we're talking about today. What is one sales task you'd love AI to handle for you in 2025? Feel free to dream big, it could be big or small. But if you want to send your answer in the chat, so you're just familiar, and then you'll know where to ask questions and how moving forward. We did get one question already. Someone asked if this will be recorded and the slides will be shared afterwards. The answer is yes. There should be a follow-up email that goes out either end of day today or tomorrow, where you'll get the recording and the slides. All right, I'm going to keep us moving as people add their answers into the chat. Just a quick update. We do have a LinkedIn group. It's the HubSpot User Group, AI and Automation and Sales and Marketing Group, where we post insightful, thought-provoking content, trying to encourage discussion. We also recap HUG events there. It's a great place to connect with other AI experts and enthusiasts. We have over 60 plus members, so a growing group. If you want to join, I'll share the link in the chat here in a minute. And yeah, love to see you over there on LinkedIn. Great. I think this is you, Phil.
Excellent. Let's just quickly mention our presenters. So thanks, Colby. We've got from 6 Sense, Ernie Owusu. Ernie, welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
And we've got from Evenbound, we've got Zach Bishman. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Phil.
And we've got from Mobileforce, my colleague, TK Lakshman. Hey, TK.
Hey, Phil, and hey, Colby.
We're really thrilled to have each of you, not just because this is a great topic, but because you each bring slightly different perspectives, both top, middle, and bottom of the funnel perspectives. So we'll talk some more about that. And if we go to the next slide, Colby, let's just share what we'll be talking about. Once Colby and I are done here introducing things, we'll hand things over to Ernie, and then go to Zach, and then go to TK. We'll spare all the other details. We will have Q&A, and Colby, correct me if I'm wrong, but folks can just drop their questions right in the Q&A section, and we'll try to get to those.
Correct. I just turned that on now, so feel free to add a question when you have it. If one of our experts knows the answer, they might chat back to you. If not, we'll save it for the end, and we'll have plenty of time to hopefully get through all your questions.
Absolutely. Let me keep going. And then Colby, why don't we read maybe some of the better answers to your icebreaker question? We can touch on those before we officially introduce Ernie. But before I do, let me just set some context here, which is AI and automation with respect to sales is critical. In fact, Yamini said it extremely well. I'll just read her quote and then we'll talk about it. AI must handle the sales groundwork. Why? Because freeing reps to excel at their best is key. Building meaningful relationships, earning trust, and forging those deeper customer connections. This Handling the sales groundwork with AI is now the true path to sales success. I agree with what she's saying for several reasons. We'll talk about those reasons in this webinar, but what's really important is that we free up sales team members to do what they really need to do and their most value-added activities, which is driving sales and driving revenues and closing deals. So with that, let's get things started. I want to introduce Ernie, but Colby, are there a few comments we had about our icebreaker question in terms of what folks are focused on with AI and sales?
Yeah, there's some good ones. Linking data, like contact data from LinkedIn, writing SOWs, look at all customer interactions and summarize that, automatically recommend next sales steps. I think that'd be a good one. Using AI to write personalized emails at scale, all good stuff. I did see a comment that the link for the LinkedIn group didn't work, so I'll fix that and put it back in the chat here as Ernest is getting started.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks for doing that. And let me just introduce Ernie by going to the next slide and mentioning that he's not only going to be answering some of the points that were just raised, but focusing on AI-powered ABM strategies. Ernie?
Awesome, appreciate that. So hi everyone, again, my name is Ernest Wusu, Head of Sales Development at 6 Sense. So I'm giving you all a lot of perspective on top of funnel primarily. Colby, go to the next slide, please. So I kind of want to lay the foundation first and foremost of how we would infuse an ABM approach with AI. So first and foremost, if you want to build this all the way out, Colby, really important for everyone to be mindful of knowing your ICP first and foremost. I'll talk about why that's important with AI, but with your ICP, think of that as like, your firmographics, which is, basically how many employees they have, demographics in terms of personas, even technology. So there's ICP that's not in your CRM. There's ICP in your CRM, as well as the behavior they're demonstrating, right? And I think a lot of us know fundamentally about different kinds of, I know a lot of us know a lot about different signals out there in the market in terms of, website activity, keyword research, hand raisers, things of that nature. But the combination of the two are what make the best accounts to go after. So essentially, do they look like your current customers and behave like your current customers? Now, when you think about leveraging AI, I can have my subjective thoughts and opinions on this company had a recent, employee change from a previous customer, as well as they look like a current customer. But the reality is you want to infuse AI with making those decisions for you, so you're not relying solely on subjective criteria. And a lot of what we do here at 6 Sense is helping build models and share with teams, specifically within their ICP, which companies look like the best customers and are behaving like the best customers, so they don't have to do that. So again, in the past of what I've done is like the subjective reason of this account looks great. I'm seeing that they are doing all these signals. I want to go after them, which at times can work. But the way you leverage AI with an ABM approach is letting AI make those decisions for you, decisions based upon your historical close one loss revenue. As a result, you bring them to the fold and win deals from that. So Colby, next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, with selecting accounts, the most important thing to be mindful of with any kind of ABM approach, and I'll talk about why this is important with AI, is you have to have a capacity of what every single rep or SDR can handle in any given time, right? There's only so much that you can do. And if you're looking for like very specific numbers to be mindful of, this top section here of metrics shows some benchmark data around, based upon the ACV that you're typically experiencing within your deals, how many accounts can you go after, right? So if you look in here, think of an organization that is going after, call it 75 to 250K deals. An SDR or an AE can only really go after 100 accounts. So you have to have the ability to spend your time wisely as you're doing that. So again, as I mentioned, in the old days, you have a list of 500, 600 accounts. I'll just choose on my own off of subjective feeling, but leveraging an AI approach can create an environment like you see right here within 6 Sense, where you have a list of accounts where you see the varying levels of engagement. You see varying levels of information on the companies to get a sense of whether or not they actually fit the mold. And that's who you're going after to best optimize your motion towards the number of accounts you're going after on a monthly basis. So being mindful first and foremost that you have an understanding of how many accounts you're going after based upon industry benchmarks, and leveraging AI to make sure that when you are spending time to go after those accounts, it's the accounts that are showing the best signals and look the best and most like your customers. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so selecting contacts. I hope you all are starting to see a theme here of what I did in the past before leveraging AI. So what you're looking at the left is an old structure that I had with our team when we were not quite as sophisticated, where if you have an account that's ICP, They're demonstrating all this behavior through AI, that they already have a conversation with you. What should you do to basically make sure that you're going after the right people? So in the past, what I did was I actually built out reports and dashboards of our historical closed won lost revenue. It said, typically when we're booking meetings, it is with this persona. So if you're going to contact someone, go after them first and foremost, right? And I built, as you can see here, this goes in progressive order from 1 through 8. This is what we used in the past to close won deals to make sure that our team was going after the right contacts. Now, with leveraging AI, you don't have to do that, because that can be an exhaustive exercise for SDRs to go through CRM, go through LinkedIn, find those contacts. If you have the information with AI, it can make those decisions for you. It's not only that this one persona is good for you, but it's also this one persona is in your CRM, has not been touched recently. They also have this level of engagement. As a result, you should be going after them. So thinking about different ways from, as I mentioned, the accounts, using AI to make sure you find the right accounts, with your contacts as well, like letting AI make the decisions for you in terms of what's happening in terms of activity, in terms of the signals they're demonstrating, in terms of the fit to the profile, and allowing that to be the mechanism used to basically go after contacts. Next slide, please. Okay, so account research checklist. So again, this is something I've done in the past, but it's also really helpful to keep in mind. When you have the accounts, when you have the contacts, what do you basically say? Like, how are you trying to find ways to make sure you're bringing these conversations to the fold with relevant research? What I did in the past without AI was actually built out a model very similar to this, where it said, okay, I know that if our team is going to go after an account and try and book a meeting, typically it's lost opportunities. Typically it's a customer that changed job or competitor. But as you can imagine, this is very hard to scale, because you have to look around to different sources and try and find different ways to pull it in to make your messaging and calls more relevant. But with AI, and a lot of what we do here at Sixth Sense, is all that information is actually baked into CRM. So when you are looking at an account, you are surface the right kind of information that's most relevant, instead of just kind of cutting through the noise and making sure that you're just finding things that you think could be good, as opposed to what you're typically doing in the past. All right, next slide, please. And actually, sorry, this should have been combined. So actually, this should have been split up, but this is what it looks like within an AI approach. So as I mentioned earlier, it's using that former structure to build a list on your own. But with AI, you see everything together, where it's prioritized based upon what you should be doing within the account from what they're showing. So think about an SDR team with the previous slide, where I had that checklist of going around to find different sources. A slide like this has everything within there, so you can just basically look in the account and find what you need in one source, and obviously a lot more efficient. Next slide, please. All right, now I guess the fun part of what do you actually say to these contacts and accounts. So again, as you're realizing, the progression we're taking right now is right accounts, right contacts, what I say to them, actually executing the outreach. So what you're seeing on the left might be somewhat familiar to you all. It's basically a generic cadence or sequence structure for doing outreach. It's a combination of calls, emails, social touches, right? So in the past, a lot of what we've done is focusing our SDR teams on this 80-20 rule. If those of you have heard of that before, where it's 80% of the content is templated and 20% is personalized. That's just not working as much as it did in the past. You have to find ways to be a lot more quality, have more quality with your outreach. So trying to find ways to automate as much as you possibly can in an informed fashion. We leverage AI to do that. So again, as I mentioned, we pull from our product to get a sense of what kind of behavior they're demonstrating. What does the company look like? What kind of signals are they showing us? And we actually are creating automated outreach through agents to say, if they look like this, we know typically these kinds of messaging convert well. So build out a cadence or sequence through this product we have called conversational email that allows us to communicate the message that's most relevant to them, right? And that definitely trumps just like blasting out some kind of generic message and not making it relevant, while also giving you the time to create messaging that's more quality focused from an SDR standpoint. So not necessarily saying that AI is going to completely eliminate the SDR role, but there are ways to augment performance by leveraging AI to automate outreach efforts that can be done through different mediums. Next slide, please. All right, my fun one over here. So I'd say the dialer is the next thing here. So very similar, as I mentioned, with email, there's definitely a great way to increase the volume through automation with AI. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but a lot of people are still answering the phone. Weirdly enough, as an SDR leader, I'm not answering my phone, but I do know a lot of people do actually answer their phone. So to kind of to think of different ways to infuse AI into this approach of trying to make sure that we're cutting through the noise, we actually incorporated a product over here called Orem, which has been phenomenal for us. And what you're basically seeing is we create a structure where when leaders are creating AI-generated lists, if you want to call it, based upon the accounts and the contacts that are most relevant, as well as what they're doing research on, we create the list for our team that are a lot more focused on mobile numbers, on specific companies that are showing levels of intent that have competitive usage. And when we do that, our team has a higher conversion rate of making calls. On the same token, our team is also building AI lists on their own through, again, going off the accounts, going off the engagement. And what we've noticed is if you look at these slides here, this shows over the past 3 quarters of what our team has done. We've actually literally tripled our outbound meeting volume through the phone by taking this AI approach, which essentially means that our managers are building lists for them that are AI focused, as well as the reps are doing the exact same thing. So just being very thoughtful. In the past, a lot of what teams did was, if I have to make calls, I'll just randomly pick out a list of contacts that meet some kind of persona and just, bury down the list, which was effective in some mediums. But because we have AI now, you don't necessarily have to do that. And our results are showing that if you are a lot more intentional with how you're building lists with AI from the leadership level as well as reps, as you can see here, and this is literally from last quarter, you can triple the volume you're receiving in terms of outreach. So that's my perspective on an AI ABM approach. So the first and foremost, you have to be very intentional with the accounts you're going after, the contacts you're going after, the level of research you're doing, be very mindful of cutting down that time with AI resources. And then last but not least, from an outreach perspective of emails, there are ways to automate certain tasks as long as you have the right signals. And with calls, being very intentional with making sure you're building a list the right way, leveraging AI so you can have an increase in effectiveness. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Ernie. That was great. And again, if you have questions for Ernie, feel free to save them for the end or type them in the Q&A, and we can get to them shortly. So I'm going to pass it over to Zach. He's on my team at Evenbound. Zach, I'll walk through the slides, and when we get into the tool, I'll hand it over to you, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep. Great.
Cool. Thanks, Colby. Yeah, and thanks, Ernest. A lot of great information there. So really, I'm going to take that next step and how do we build upon everything that Ernest just touched on in the prospecting motion using HubSpot's new prospecting agent. So this was kind of one of I think the most highly anticipated tools with the kind of the release of all the Breeze intelligence features that HubSpot announced at Inbound 24. So excited to share this with you guys. So before we get into that tool, I really just want to touch on the challenges of sales prospecting and the current motion, some things that we typically see. The biggest one is really just going to be the amount of time that it takes to perform all of these prospecting processes. And a lot of the times we don't have a specific or clear direction. And, that can lead to a lot of inconsistent follow-ups and missed opportunities. Unfortunately, we work with a lot of clients, sales managers come to us, say, hey, we've got, hundreds, sometimes thousands of contacts just sitting in our CRM. And, it's just too much for our team to sift through, and we're missing a lot. So that data overload makes it difficult to find those actionable insights. So really what that comes down to is we need some kind of tool. And, ultimately that's going to be hopefully AI to drive those insights, this year, 2025 and going forward. So before we get into this, I think it's important to note that outbound and prospecting is by no means dead. It's, and Ernest can attest to this, Yamini and everyone at HubSpot can attest to this. It's still an effective way to drive those leads, nurture those leads, turn those qualified leads into deals. And I think that's proven by HubSpot introducing things like the lead object, the new lead object, the prospecting workspace, and that lead pipeline. And really, this is just that next evolution of that, leveraging AI and powered by artificial intelligence. So really what this HubSpot prospecting agent will allow us to do is automate that research, lead prioritization and email content creation. So it's going to give us those proactive recommendations and suggest the best times that we can engage with our prospects. It's going to streamline those tasks. All of those kind of manual follow-up tasks are going to be much easier now with this prospecting agent, and it's going to lead to those smarter insights. One thing I want to touch on here is you can see that little beta tag up in the top right there. This still is a tool that's in closed beta. It was actually quite limited when they released it at Inbound. I think they only enrolled about 50 customers into it. Now, I think by the end of 2024, they said that they had enrolled 500 customers into it. And Phil and I were talking just before this. It sounds like hopefully they'll open this up sometime in February to at least a more kind of public beta. So we can certainly, provide some information on how you can try to request this now if you haven't already. And it sounds like from everything that I've heard as well, this will be available for Sales Hub professional and enterprise accounts, which is great. And really what this is going to allow us to do is empower our sales teams with faster sales cycles, being able to weed out some of those unqualified prospects right away, and obviously write that email content, which leads to just more consistency in our process, improved productivity, and then the biggest one here is just scalability, right? It's just how much volume can we handle and do more with less. Cool. So let's get into it. I'm excited about this because, like I said, this has been a pretty limited beta, and I don't think many people have seen this yet. So let's get into the tool here. If I can share my screen. Great. Okay. So this is the first page you'll be taken to when you open up the prospecting agent. It's going to live under this, Breeze AI little icon on the sidebar here. And this is this overview tab. So a couple things right off the bat here. We've got, some dashboards, some metrics, automated enrollment, some different forms that we're using. We'll talk about some of what this means in a minute here. Maybe some emails that are being sent out, already sent, and then we can look at some contacts that are currently enrolled in this. And then we've got some additional tabs up here. Again, looking at contacts that have enrolled, that are being researched by AI, that are ready for review. And then we've got a nice Analyze tab here up at the top where we can see the different features or actions that people will take along this process. So how many have we enrolled versus how many have gotten all the way to booked a meeting with us as a result of this agent. So first I want to just talk about the ways that contacts can get enrolled in here. There's a couple different ways. So if I go to enroll, you'll see I have the option to manually enroll contacts or companies, or set up automated enrollment. So first we're going to click on this manually enroll contacts, and that's going to take me to this page here. So you can see I've got some dummy data in here. So I'm going to select Pam and Jim Halpert here. And you can see this is just pulling from our contacts in our CRMs, contacts and companies in HubSpot. So I can apply filters here if I need to sift through this the contacts more specifically. There's even going to be some tags on here. If you have target personas built out, you'll notice, if somebody meets that target persona, that you'll have a little tag in here. So making it really easy to find those contacts that you do want to reach out to and enroll into this. So if I'm happy with that, I'm going to click next. And then here's just going to, before I enroll these contacts, it's just going to give me an overview of what's going to happen. So you can see this agent is going to send emails on the behalf of myself. It'll include a meeting link in here. This is just a HubSpot meeting link that I have set up. We've got it writing those emails, a sequence of 3 emails in a professional tone. And then we've got this semi-autonomous mode on. Basically what this means, and there's a couple different options that we'll talk about once we get into the settings here, but this one's really important. There's a semi-autonomous mode and a fully autonomous mode. And the semi-autonomous, when I enroll a contact into this sequence, it's not going to immediately fire off those automated emails that the agent writes. It's going to give me that manual checkpoint so that I can go in, I can review those emails and make changes if I need to. And really that's kind of best practice as we get started with AI here. Of course, as you get more comfortable and you kind of review some of the things that AI is writing, you can think about turning on that fully autonomous mode. But I think to start, it's definitely helpful to have that manual checkpoint. And then much like the sequences tool within HubSpot, it will, if a contact replies to an email or books a meeting as a result of one of these agent emails, they'll get kicked out of this sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and start enrolling these contacts here. And you can see that just takes me back to this page here. So if I go to enrollments, now you can see my current enrollments and then some that are researching here. So the AI is actively researching based on information that we have on the contact or the company record. So things like form submissions, notes, calls, previous activities that are stored here. And then of course, any information that it can scan from the domain, from anything else that I can find available on the website, from things like the job title that we have listed here. So it takes into account a lot of these different factors, and you can see how quickly it just did that. So looks like it finished up Pam there, and it's still working on Jim. So it's a matter of a couple of minutes. Depending on how much data you have in there, it may take a couple more minutes, but it's usually, in my experience, pretty quick. So now we've got Pam here is ready for review. So again, because we're on that semi-autonomous mode, we can go in and review these emails. So these are the emails that it spits out here. So it's got one email spaced out by 2 days, another email here, and again, a third email spaced out by 2 days. And just like the sequences tool, I can come in here, edit these before I say, hey, I want to start this outreach. So this is a really good way to completely automate the creation of this content and give us some really actionable insights. I just want to talk about the setup of this agent as well. And automatically, there's one thing that we can do here rather than manually enrolling contacts like I just did, and that's setting up automatic enrollments. So if I come into an additional settings page here, you can see we've got a couple different options to automate. So we can set up some trigger-based automations, things like, hey, if a contact reaches the pricing page on our website, let's enroll them into this prospecting agent. Or I think this one is going to be a really common one. If a contact submits a form on our website, we'll enroll them here. So I can click on edit. I can choose from any HubSpot form or meeting link that I have set up in here. So you can see I've got a couple of content offers from the Evenbound website set up in here. If somebody submits that form, they'll automatically get enrolled, but they'll still have, again, if we're on that semi-autonomous mode, we'll still have that capability to review that before saying, yes, let's send out these emails. And then we can get into some criteria-based things, something like if a contact hasn't engaged with us for more than 90 days, let's enroll them here, or if they've been added to a list that we have saved in HubSpot. I think my favorite opportunity here is to be able to create a workflow. So it sounds like they have a workflow action here that allows us to enroll contacts into a prospecting agent, which really opens up that flexibility, and we can use all the different, very robust filter criteria in order to enroll contacts in here. So, even like cross object, if we need to filter on, custom properties in a custom object based on, what a contact has, we can certainly do that. So this is going to be, I think, a huge tool as people start to set up this automated enrollment. And then lastly, we can get into the settings of this agent here. And really, this is just kind of building out the identity of this agent. So you can see here, I've got a couple options here where I can send from a single user within HubSpot as long as I have a connected inbox. Or what I think is a really great feature here is that I can send from the contact owner. So I don't know if you saw when I had those enrollments, I had Colby set to the contact owner. So if I were to enroll Pam Beasley there, rather than myself being the sender there, it would send from Colby's connected inbox because she's the owner of that contact. So really nice to have that flexibility there. And then we can get into the sources and the training. So really the resources that this AI agent is using to build out that content. So this is going to be all about your business. What does your company sell? What's your value prop? What industries do you sell to? It's just a way to inform the AI on that content that it's building out. And then, like I mentioned, here's that autonomous mode that you can toggle to semi or fully autonomous. And then we can also add in lists here that we can exclude from contacts from ever being enrolled into that agent. So I know that was a lot to go through. Probably, like I said, a lot that most of you have not seen before. So we'll definitely have some time for Q&A and hoping that there's some good discussion there. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Phil and TK to talk about kind of bottom of the funnel sales motion.
Absolutely. And before we jump in, Colby and Zach, I see why you and Evenbound are so great at prospecting with all these great tools behind you. So, and by the way, before we jump back into our next section, let's just ask the audience, because I don't want folks falling asleep. How are we doing so far? How great has this been? You've heard from two great folks talking about really important aspects of the sales funnel. On a scale of 1 to 5, just put your rating for the webinar so far. Let's see how many reactions and responses we get. So that's good. That's good. We're getting a couple comments. Yes, don't be shy. A couple 5s. That's good. Don't pull any punches. Be honest with us. Colby, great job so far. Zach and Ernie, thank you. Let me just introduce TK. If you want to share your screen, I'll introduce our section. Thank you for all the great feedback. All the great credit goes to Colby. So thank you, Colby, for keeping us on track and helping organize this. First, as we introduce TK, don't be shy about sharing that screen when you can. I want to just set this up. Also, if you have questions, please drop those into the Q&A section, and we will definitely get to those after this section, which will be during our end segment. We've heard from 6 Sense about account-based marketing. We've heard from Evenbound about prospecting and the new prospecting agent from HubSpot. Both are key in moving leads from the prospects and leads from the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, where a lead becomes a deal and an interested party that says, great, now I want to ask you questions about your service and your solution. So that really is the segue to this next section, which will be focused on automating quote to close processes. So I want to introduce TK. TK, do you need any help in presenting, or how are you doing?
All right. So first of all, thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. And I was trying to share my screen, but it says I do not have the ability to share my screen. So what I'm going to ask is, if Phil, if you could.
Yeah, we'll improvise.
Over.
Absolutely. You got it. Let me go ahead and I'll share my screen. And see, it's always good, Colby, to stay on your toes as we do these. And again, thanks for all the great feedback. Angela, fantastic. Aaron, Elise, we've got a great question from Matthew, which we will get to. So first, let me share that screen. Here we go. Okay, and TK, why don't I introduce you by just putting into context what you're going to talk about, and then we'll go from there. How does that
plan? Yep.
So before TK jumps in, we work together at Mobileforce. We're all about speed, and that's why this webinar is so important. Because when you get to the bottom of the funnel, we've seen that B2B decision makers, buyers, the people buying our solutions, their number one pain point, according to various studies, is slow speed. They want to move faster. They want to get information faster. They want to get quotes and updates and visibility into inventory faster. That's their number one priority. In fact, speed was cited twice as often as price. So given how important that is, now that we are in the AI and automation era, how can we use automation to speed things up and improve our close rates and enhance revenues? TK is going to talk some more about that.
Great. Thank you, Phil. And to continue from where Zach left off, as you can see, we are going further and further down the funnel. And we have reached a stage where, starting from Ernie, who was at a very high level talking about the ABM strategies and using AI at a contact level, at a lead level, we've done prospecting that Zach was talking about. And now we're down to a point where there is an engagement happening between, say, us as a salesperson and the buyer, who we cannot forget about, who's the important person in this room. So for all of you on this webinar, one of the things that I'm always impressed with is whatever your roles are, at some point, you've always realized that you need to have a process to do what you're doing. And not just that there has to be a process, you need to know what that process is. And more importantly, you should have used that process to figure out what are its strengths and weaknesses. And once we get to that point, that's when you realize that these processes are always areas where you can make improvements. And those improvements typically come in the last few years. They come from the point of view of adding AI and adding automation to those processes. So what processes are we talking about? For this webinar, we've been focusing entirely on the sales engagement. So on this specific area of sales engagement, there are three things that now that there is a buyer who's interested in whatever you're selling, there are three things that you have to worry about, you have to talk about, you have to engage with the buyer. First, you have to figure out what it is that the buyer exactly is looking for. They might say at a high level that they're looking for a certain feature, a functionality, or a product, or a set of products, but it's probably always good to size what their needs are with respect to what you're selling. And from that point on, the next thing is to get a certain pricing estimate, maybe a quote or a proposal to the buyer, and get an idea as to, are we in the same ballpark? A good sales rep would do these things. And even more so, a good sales rep would be able to then go inside their own organization, because there are organizational structures to play here. And specifically, there could be a deal desk. There could be people who might need to approve certain discounts. There might be some internal processes to follow before a quote can be established and given to the customer. So those are all things that fall into the approval category and things that a good sales rep would have already addressed. So these are all the things that if you did well, you have a benefit of using a CPQ-like strategy. So next here in the sales engagement stage, as you can tell on the left, if you go from a contact to a lead to a prospect, the level of engagement keeps increasing. But only when you get to an opportunity, that's when you're really actively engaging with that prospect or that potential customer. And then when they do become a customer, then the level of engagement gets even higher than that. And the roles of various people in the organization who play an important part in taking that engagement from minimal to a customer is such that you start with the marketing folks who do, from an automation standpoint, they do tracking and scoring. That's what you heard about when Ernie was talking to you. And further down, when you go down to scoring and then engaging, the transition from marketing to sales comes on. And at that point, you heard Zach talk about various kinds of prospecting and how you would engage. And then at that point, once the customer is actively engaged, this is when you have to provide something to that customer as a metric for what it is that you and the customer can agree on is the framework of the deal. And that metric or that entity is a quote. And the most important thing in creating a quote is figuring out what it is that the customer wants, adding those things into the quote, perhaps adding some terms and conditions, perhaps adding some services that might be needed in addition to whatever products you're selling. So in addition to all of those that you've done as a good sales rep, you would then focus on enabling that quote to result in a deal which results in the customer using whatever product it is that you're selling, which would lead to perhaps a service request from the customer. Hey, I have a problem, I have a situation, I need some help. And that would lead to a field service part of the organization to engage with the customer. So as you can tell, there are various parts of the organization that engage with the customer at different levels. Now, from the AI standpoint, one of the things that I notice here is that we have content, we have campaigns that can be automatically generated by AI. And I think some of the icebreaker questions we're talking about that, can I do this or can I do that automatically? That's fantastic. The next level down is these agents, such as the prospecting agent that Zach was describing. From an AI standpoint, there are these agents that make your life easier. And it's great to try to use them, but the only thing to remember is it might involve a change in the way you do work. It might involve changing the way you process various activities in your sales pipeline. And finally, as you go down to the quote, a set of recommendations. This is also a question that came up in the icebreaker. Hey, is there a way to recommend what it is that I should be selling to this specific prospect or a customer? Because we know something about that customer profile. We know this is what they're interested in. But from my large list of products that I can sell, is there a way for you to recommend 2 or 3 or 4 or a bunch of them that would be very valuable for this specific customer need? And that's where AI comes into play. So now what I'd like to show you is not just the fact that there is automation and then there is AI. What also happens is that different sales organizations have different processes. So in this slide, what you're seeing is essentially 3 different processes. To focus on, the bottom section reflects a simple process, so CPQ proposals, where you're actually trying to create a quote from us an opportunity. Starting with an opportunity, I want to create a quote. Well, the first thing you do when you create that quote is to find out or to provide some information about the customer, because that's how you'll be sending the quote to. Specifically, who's the actual contact in that customer organization, and specifically what group they're working in, so on and so forth. The next thing you do is to go create a quote. The next thing you do is to get some signatures, your signature, perhaps the customer signature or the prospect signature. Finally, you generate some documents and then you send that over to invoice. That's the simplest process. Turns out that almost nobody follows that simple process. So the key to streamlining quoting is to be able to automate not just the process, but to be able to configure changes to that process so that a specific sales organization's needs are met. So let's take a look at the second example. So the rectangle highlighted in pink in the previous slide talks about joint engagement. This is where, in addition to the previous process, you might have a specific step where you actually jointly engage with the customer, where you get some sizing information, you get some product information, you get some features that you need or configuration information, and all of that, you don't need to guess. These are things that the customer is happy to provide. So when you create a new proposal in that middle bucket with the blue rectangle around it, the joint engagement plan reflects the step in that process where you and the customer are actively engaging in creating a quote. And as you know, there are other steps down the list here where you might want to get some comments or some feedback from the customer. You might want to add some marketing materials and collateral as attachments to that proposal to make it a lot more robust. So this second process is a little bit different than the first. And to complete this picture here, the last process actually involves subscriptions and invoicing. So as you know, selling products is very, very different than selling subscriptions. And when it comes to subscriptions, the big challenge is to be able to figure out how to do those subscription pricing, the subscription terms, so on and so forth. And importantly, once you're done with determining the subscription, how to transfer that into an invoice. So each of these three screens that you saw are screens that are available in a quoting process, in a good quoting process, such as the one that Mobileforce provides. So if you could now go to the next slide, the businesses that probably will succeed or do the best are the ones that can leverage a CPQ solution. And the key thing to remember here is that we're all trying to get that CPQ solution automated as much as possible, perhaps optimized to your specific needs by customizing it. But there are some clear benefits. And the one that I should talk the most about is the one that involves faster time to quote and proposal. Because almost everybody, that's the real challenge. How can I quickly get to a point where I can create a quote and close the deal? All right, next slide, please. So at this point, I'd like to take a step back and say, what have we been talking about? The speed that we've been talking about in the process of selling, in the process of prospecting, in the process of quoting, is something that's great to see. But what's scary and what's amazing is the speed in AI itself that has made these processes easy to automate. And so from left to right, what I'd like to share with you is how the world has changed in not more than 6 or 7 years. So from the point where recently, or maybe 6 years ago, we used to talk about LLMs and prompt engineering, the biggest value there was how can this mechanism help the sales guy get more information about the prospect, about the sales process, and so on and so forth. To second step here in the middle, where we talk about RAGs, or retrieval augmented generation, which make the sales guy more human-like, or which makes the automation even more human-like, so that the sales guy can do a whole lot more in streamlining the sales process. And the key with RAGs is to make that sales process accurate, to make it unbiased, and to make it efficient. And what we've achieved already with RAG is to be able to get to a point where we are doing this kind of a webinar, we can talk about top to bottom of the funnel. But what's to come in the future is where I think the most excitement is. And this is where the concept of agentic AI or the use of agents come to play. Agents are things that are always there. You can always use them. You don't have to turn them on. You don't have to turn them off. They're there for you to use. And whenever you want to do boring, automated, repetitive tasks, and frankly, I do that much of my time. And I'm sure all of you do these boring, repetitive tasks. And frankly, many of the things that we've talked about today, if you could automate them, then you would end up doing other things that might help the sales process even more. So the idea of using these autonomous agents is to be able to automate the sales process. And let me leave you with a really cool vision, which we are working on right now. And that vision is the ability to use tools such as Operator. But it's not just Operator, but there are other tools as well in the market. And some of these tools are easy to access. But these tools, what they're doing is they are making it so that a salesperson, a sales rep, can automate even logging into a CRM and then firing off a CPQ system and then creating a quote and then sending that quote to a customer. That entire process can be automated with maybe 2 or 3 parameters. What's the parameter? Hey, what's the deal I want to work on? What's the customer I want to send a quote to? What are the products I want to add to the quote? That's it. You shouldn't have to worry about the user interface. You shouldn't have to worry about drag and drop. You shouldn't have to worry about clicking here or clicking there or saving this or saving that. The system takes care of all of that for you. And that's what we are working with, mainly because we already have the process in place. We already have guardrails in place to make sure that the process doesn't go off base. And we already have rules in place that automate the process. And finally, these rules are configurable so we can use the automation that is given to us by tools such as Operator or a computer use or more recently browser use, which are all tools that we are working with to get to a stage where that sales rep can truly be holding a cup of coffee in their hand and answering a few questions using a voice interaction, such as who's the customer prospect, what is the product that you want to sell, and who do you want to send it to? That's it. So that's the ideal holy grail of automation.
That is great. TK, that is extremely powerful. You touched on a number of really important issues, which we will also pick up on in our Q&A. So thank you very much. In fact, Colby, what I'm going to do is hand over to you so you can share. So I'll stop sharing. And let me just say to the audience, we've crammed a lot of really important points and insights into just about a 45-minute section. So we may or may not get to every question, but drop those in. Also, Colby's going to show our Get Social slide again. If there's anyone that you think will benefit from this HubSpot user group and more webinars like this, please share the LinkedIn link or the HubSpot user group link. We'd love to add more. We are now considered one of the fastest growing HubSpot user groups, and we're thrilled about that. So with that, Colby, do you want to start with the first question?
Yeah, I just want to recap a question that's been answered so everybody is aware. This is specific to the prospecting agent. Matthew asked if the outbound automation includes LinkedIn outreach or connection requests. Zach was able to answer that in chat and said, currently the outbound prospecting agent only includes direct email outreach, but it's still in the beta. I assume this tool is going to grow. And so that might be a feature added in the future. But a great question.
Just to add on there, Colby, I think the prospecting agent is built on the foundation of the HubSpot sequences and templates tool. So it wouldn't surprise me if they added in some automated tasks for LinkedIn follow-up or phone call follow-up, something like that the agent could automatically create as a result of enrolling people into that. So I think I would imagine something like that's coming soon.
Yeah, great. It's good to know that it was built on that email sequence foundation. That's helpful.
Great.
Phil, do you want to take a question? Otherwise, we do have one more in the Q&A that we can
let's take that one from Elise. I'll let you handle that one.
Sure. So Elise asked, do you need Breeze credits to use the prospecting agent in HubSpot? Also, where is the agent getting its data? Thanks. Zach, I'm hoping you have an answer here.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Good question from a fellow Evenbounder, Elise. Thank you. As of right now, and again, I'm going to preface everything by saying that because we're still early days in beta here. As of right now, you don't need Breeze credits to use the prospecting agent. And as far as the data that or where the agent is getting this data, it's a combination of a couple things. It's recent engagement, so things like form submissions, page views, emails, calls, playbooks, notes, meetings, all those different activities that are are logged in HubSpot on either the contact or associated company record. And then, of course, publicly available information. If you've got the company domain in there, it will scan for that, pull in some of that information as well. So kind of combining that recently sunset HubSpot insights as well into this to create that or generate that email content.
Yep, I think that's exactly what I've heard as well, Zach. And just to add on, the prospecting agent, like Zach mentioned earlier, will be coming with both Sales Hub Enterprise and Pro. And the Breeze credits are applicable when you want to enhance your data. So HubSpot acquired a company called Clearbit, and they now offer that enhancement. And you can use those credits to enhance your data, which in turn will make your prospecting even more targeted and accurate. Let's pick up on our next question. Colby, why don't I jump in and ask it while you get the next one ready, which is, we'll go to Ernie and then TK. What are the most frequent questions or concerns you're getting from folks that are thinking they want to get started, but may have reluctance? We'll call this the inertia question. For folks that may want to jump into ABM and start automating what they're doing, Ernie, what do you say to those folks? What are those questions they ask, and how do you answer them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is people always have, not subjective reasoning that backs up what they're doing, but a lot of just experience informs the decisions you make, and you rely on that experience to ultimately help you be more effective, and you don't want to steer away from that, right? So having an environment where, for example, if you're using AI to determine that this account is ready to have a conversation with you versus this other account, which you really want to talk to, but is not, sometimes you see situations where people, they'll steer towards what they actually know and feel comfortable with as opposed to what the actual AI is showing. So I guess the biggest thing I'll say is the good thing about AI is it relies on data. There's no refuting it. It's objective. And though as a salesperson, there are a lot of things that we just subjectively know and have gut feeling on, the data speaks for itself. And as a result, that's always the best way to pursue.
Definitely. The data definitely does speak for itself. It's well said. And let's just apply that same question. Thank you, Ernie. Over to you, TK. When you are talking to companies that are thinking but not quite sure about moving forward with automating their quote to close processes, what are you hearing about their biggest concerns? And then what do you say in response to those?
Okay, great. I'd like to follow up on what Ernie was just saying. I think people are often concerned about change. They've been doing things a certain way. They know it works. That's how they've always been doing. And if you present to them another way of doing it, where maybe at a certain point, a decision point is taken and your way of doing it said, let's go left, and this new way of doing it says, let's go right. And you'll be like, I've been going left for the last 5 years. Why should I go right? And I think that's what Ernie was saying. I think the biggest way to overcome this barrier, and it's not really something that's even a barrier, it's natural, is what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong about it. It happens. People are used to the way they've been doing business. And I think the best thing is to say, take a chance, try something different. And if I may, automation is an area where we've made a few missteps to get to a point where we have reached some level of automation. It wasn't like automation has been great all the time. Sometimes, we've made mistakes. Same with AI. AI isn't always saying the right thing or doing the right thing. In fact, I would say it's more often than not been doing the wrong thing, to a point where you've gotten to this point where it's kind of doing the right thing some other time. So give it a chance, see what it says. And if you like it, use it. If you don't like it, don't use it. It's quite all right. So it isn't an all or none proposition. But the most important thing is to hit the ground running, get started, and then you'll figure out, if you're starting to use a CPQ, if you're starting to use a CRM, you'll start noticing certain ways that you've been doing business will change.
Well said. Colby, I think we've got another good question that just came in.
Yeah, we do. From Angela. She said, is the prospecting agent helping BDR in really early stages of prospecting, or is it more useful later on? Zach, do you have a thought on this?
Yeah, I think it can be both, but I think where it's going to be most helpful and most used, I'll give a scenario. Let's say a company purchases a list from ZoomInfo or Apollo, a prospecting tool like that. We've got 1,000 contacts in our CRM. being able to reach out to those contacts at volume or at scale really quickly and qualify those, connect with those, book a meeting, whatever that next step is for you. Identifying those sales qualified leads so that we can turn them into deals is going to be the best way to use this tool. But that's not to say that it can't be used in other ways. So I think it's finding that sweet spot for whatever works for your process. Turning marketing qualified leads that come in from the website on form submissions. I mentioned that in the demo. I think can be really helpful if we've got hundreds of contacts again at scale that are coming through the website, and we need somebody to connect with those people and convert them to qualified leads. I think that's another great use case. And combining that with some of those automated enrollment criteria that I mentioned, things like the workflows and some of those other tools, I think is going to be really helpful.
That's well said. That's great. And Colby, why don't we ask one more question and then we'll let you wrap things up. Why don't you put up the social slide? So a reminder to follow us on LinkedIn and also pass this along to anyone you think might be interested in our group. And then we'll go back one slide so you know how to reach everyone. But final question for all three is for folks that want to get started, but want to get started quickly and as painlessly as possible. What can you say to them? Let's start with Ernie and 6 Sense. For the folks that reach out to you and say, yeah, this is interesting, let's fire things up. What do you do and say so that they can hit the ground running like TK said earlier?
Yeah, starting is pretty easy, right? And again, we're relying on data to make the decisions that we should do in terms of selecting accounts and contacts we're going after. Now, the hard part I will say is once you have the data, again, as I mentioned, getting everyone to corral around that. But again, setting it up and starting is very easy. It's objective. You can see what's working, what's not, and why. The hard part is ultimately getting people to change old habits and move to a direction that's a lot more data driven, but can be done very easily as well.
Absolutely. And I'm going to come to you in a second, Zach, because we're going to let Evenbound wrap things up. But TK, when folks come to you and they say, I'm very interested, I do want to move forward, but I need to do this without pain and without interrupting our current work and operations, what do you do and say to those folks?
Well, I think there's a few things that can be done to make your life easier. First, recognition that any new tool, software, whatever it is, process that you're using will have certain groups of users who come with different roles. So you have admins, you have buyers or sellers. Those are already 3 different roles, right? And then you might have partners that might be using those roles. The key is to have a system that enables each of these roles to come in and use the system easily. And more importantly, the system has role-based access. So a buyer gets to see a certain things, a seller gets to see a different set of things, the admin gets to see a completely different set of things. And setting those things up is a challenge. But if you set them up correctly, the rest of the process becomes very, very easy. So understanding what your role is and what your starting point in the process is, what your ending point is, and making sure that the tool addresses your needs as you grow.
That's well said and very compelling. And Zach, from Evenbound's perspective, because you and Evenbound work with so many companies tackling a number of projects related to sales and marketing and automation, what do you advise folks that say we want to do it, but we want to do it as seamlessly as possible?
Yeah, I would say start by learning the functionality of whatever tool you're interested in. For example, the prospecting agent, learn what those features are that you can utilize, and then start slow with it. Maybe pick out a champion or somebody on your team to pilot that, so you can get some real data into your system, and then make tweaks from there. It's always a better idea, I think, to start slow and iterate on that process with any new tool, rather than going gung-ho and going all in right from the start. So
absolutely. Well, I'm going to hand it over to Colby, but before I do, let me say thanks to each of you, Ernie, Zach, and TK, for a great presentation and discussion. Thanks also to our audience for the great engagement and great questions. Colby, do you want to take things home?
Yeah, just as we wrap up here, I know we're at the end of the hour. Here's some additional links if you want to reach out to any of us. Here are our emails. Like I said, you should all get an email following this, where you'll have the presentation, the slides, and the recording, which will, of course, include this information. And I will just say, so many of you joined our social LinkedIn group while we were here, over 20 people, which is great. So over 80 people on that channel. Really encourage you all to, ask questions, start conversations. And I know there'll be plenty of AI and automation experts in that channel, happy to engage with you. Awesome. Anything else, Phil? Did we do it?
I think we did it. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.